Africans celebrate Freedom Day, there are calls for focus to be placed on building mutually beneficial relationships. In an opinion piece published in the Daily Maverick, political analyst Dr Ongama Mtimka points out that there is a need for more collaboration. He joins us now for more on this. Dr. Mtimka, good afternoon to you. Thank you so much, or evening rather. It's interesting because I'm hearing people saying, well, we're commemorating Freedom Day. Others saying, well, are we celebrating Freedom Day? And I'm keen to hear where you are with that particular question. Are we celebrating or commemorating? But as we start off with the I suppose the more important stuff, really, you've written this piece. As democratic South Africa turns 31, let's look at building a mutually beneficial future. And you say, let's not talk about 1994, let's not talk about where we've been. And you say, because there's nothing new to discuss there. Take us through that thought just as we kick off.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that the tendency among some South Africans today of wanting to say things have gone worse since 1994, or questioning the very meaning of our of freedom for particular groups, especially in the recent conversation for white people or white Afrikaners. In my view, in fact, Black people, the majority, have been asking that question for the longest time. And in fact, in political science, we've made the point that there's a distinction between procedural democracy, in terms of which a country, through the competitiveness of its elections, through how free and fair it is democratic. But when it comes to an inclusive society where economically and socially people are advancing, it's been limited as far as that is concerned. So what's new with this complaint now is that it's coming from a sector of society that was generally associated with wealth, and in many ways still is associated with wealth. So the point I'm making is that instead of us trying to remake the history and say the glass is half empty and have debates about whether the glass is half empty or is half full, it's time that we recognize that the democratic period has had a lot of gains, especially for Black people, even though there's a lot that has not been done even for them. And also that even white people, the economy that they were a part of that was exclusive and isolated in the apartheid period became open, and we saw a lot of prosperity, South African companies going global and listing in different stock exchanges, and then capital markets being a lot more open. Now, what I'm saying is that we must not be too fixated with a debate about the good or the bad old days, that we fail to recognize the strategicness of the moment to carve a path that is truly a united path for South Africa from today onwards.
Yeah, and just to highlight the point that you make, you're right. Even the representatives of those hitherto seen as wealthy and privileged have also begun questioning their freedom in South Africa. Then you get into, I suppose, the global moment, right? The Trump effect. And you talk about his plutocracy, you know, which is, of course, the government by the wealthy. But what it calls us to do as a country, and really what I suppose this, you know, what the debate looks like in the US and how it impacts us. And you talk about, you know, the battle for or against wokeness by, you know, Trump supporters. But what that means now, as we reflect on when we are, break that down for us.
Yeah, so a colleague of mine, Nomalanga Mkhize, often makes this point that we should be very careful about making use of concepts that are used in the US in that context, like diversity, equity, and inclusion, when ours is, in fact, a transformation path based on our own context. Because their wokeness assumed a character that that even by South African standards would not necessarily be what people are aspiring to, except a more inclusive society based purely on the history that we've come from, where the economic majority was in fact the political minority. The point that I'm making there is that What's happened in the US with the rise of Trump and the so-called PayPal mafia, who have got very strong South African ties to apartheid South Africa, is that it is they who have, in fact, framed how Washington sees Pretoria to be in the same terms as it is happening in the US. And for them, they can make the parallels because they left an apartheid South Africa that was busy collapsing at the time that they left. But my argument is that both Washington and Pretoria needs to recognize that there is a value for mutual relations, and also the lobby groups internally must recognize that this wave of influence that their acolytes in Washington, in the Trump administration, are making is not going to be sustainable for them to continue to live the life that they desire in South Africa. And this being emboldened by that rhetoric of the Trump administration, it misinterprets how much power comes from superpowers when it comes to the politics of the domestic politics of a country. So I'm saying, instead of devoting their energies on tarnishing South Africa's reputation, they should devote their energies on resolving the key issues that affect us as a country. And I'm arguing that in them being carried by that Trumpist wave, they are similar to those among us who are wanting to focus on songs that are still divisive and not, in fact, finding solutions to the grievances that both the right wing and the left wing are exploiting. So we should devote a lot more time finding solutions to the issues of poverty, unemployment, inequality, and farm murders, and whatever other issue is a problem.
Yeah.
But let's do so working together internally in the country.
Yeah. Ongama, your line freezing there, and I hope that you're still there because I want to get this final thought in. So what you present then as where we should be.
Unsustainable.
Okay, you froze there for a little bit, Ongama, but I want to squeeze in one last question before I let you go. What then we should do, and you've already, I suppose, alluded to it, but I find it quite interesting. You write, perhaps the mutual feeling of displeasure, which says, you talk about those that were formerly advantaged and those that are formerly disadvantaged and perhaps remain in those positions equally dissatisfied with the status quo. You say perhaps the mutual feeling of dissatisfaction or displeasure presents us with a better platform for constructing a mutually beneficial future. So let's unite in our displeasure. An interesting thought. How? The question is, because there's a national dialogue perhaps that we need. What's the platform that we use to do that?
Sure. So 1994 allowed sections of our population to continue to live apart because people could strive and succeed. Now that system has come crumbling because the economy is failing. We're facing a crisis of accumulation, as Sampito Blanche would put it. Now, what I'm arguing is needed is that now that we are all in agreement that things are not well or are not quite as well as we thought, and by the way, the majority had always been saying things are not well. That's why we are the protest capital of the world, except that they were being ignored all the time. So I'm saying now that there's a mutual agreement, even if it's from different spirits or different motivations, how we should work together is as follows. There are people who've got economic capital, there are people who've got social capital, and there are people who have been wanting to impose themselves in, whether they be a wrongly labeled a mafia that's trying to impose itself in, or the neither in employment, education, or training 10 million strong young people. There should be bridges that are brought, and we must leverage the funding that government is creating, for example, in the through the UIF, through the presidential employment schemes, to say, bring the people with skills, bring the people who've got some capital, and have them have enough affirmation and boldness to actually start projects or grow projects that have been started by others who actually don't have capital, so that we, as we bridge these economic disparities and we tear down the walls of separation, we're able to harness South Africa's talent and succeed.
Yeah, because we are all within these borders and the challenges of the country affecting all of us in one way or any shape or form. Thank you so much for that. Political analyst there, Dr. Ongama Mtimka, saying to us, let's not focus too much on what's gone wrong. Nothing's new there, but we can agree that we all feel some displeasure in the country and work together with that one. Something to think about.